What's that behind you? Is that a flag?
You don't even want to know.
Oh,
I was like stuck at the airport. Like we were supposed to take a small flight, and I got stuck at the airport. So I'm here, and I got informed there's going to be like a landing by 5 p.m. So that's when I'll try to cut the lecture by. But I'll be back in the U.S. by Friday. So just a couple more days. Anyway, all right. So I did want to just review. Um, like what we went through yesterday. And honestly, like I think the main thing is just kind of having an outline in your head of the various methods, right? So for me, the way I do that is just thinking about different data types, right? So it's like working with strings, working with uh, like integers or numeric, right? And then date times, right? And once you kind of do that, then maybe already you can start to organize what we did, right? So with strings, it was like, well, you can see it. We did slicing, right, which was like left and then right, you know? So it was, okay, select from this column a few characters. And then right, and then there was more than that, right? There was essentially the equivalent of split and join, where split was, the split part. And then again, I'm guessing it's the column name that comes first. Uh, and then it's what you want to split on. And then the number, and then the index, remember, starting at 1 instead of 0. So this would be the first thing up until the first space. This would be the middle word, right? And then if there's split, there's also join, essentially, or like concat. Not really join, it's more concatenate. And that is the concat function, right? And you can just concat, like let's say we did like first name, comma, last name. And just remember, right, this will just squish them together, but this takes as many arguments as we want, so we can do like a space in between there. So this is one way of doing concatenation, and then another way of doing concatenation is doing the double pipes. All right. So that was essentially like our string methods. So like I said, you kind of just think of an outline. I think this is a good use case for outlining this. And think of like the Python equivalents, right? Like this is obviously slicing, splitting, concatenating, right? And that's kind of it. Integers, I know we did round, right? And then the number of digits to round to, right? Like the number of decimal points, I should say, to round to. So this would just give us like the whole numbers if we round, what would be an example, like price to the 0, right? Then that gave us just like 5 or 4. If you go to 1, that's one digit, so it's like 4.0. And then the other thing we got was, I think there's like the modulo, which we didn't really talk about. Modulo is just like the remainder, So if it's, I think in the reading it gives the example of even and odd. If it's like modulo ID 2, the remainder of 1. Of the number 1 when you divide by 2 is going to be 1. The remainder of 2 when you divide by 2 is going to be 0, right? So if you want to, you can now kind of like select based on that if you want to. Like select the odds by doing where the modulo ID 2 equals 1, right? Because here it's 1, here it's 0, 3, it's back to 1 again, right? Because 3 divided by 2 is 1 and 1 remainder, so that gives us 1 here. And then there's date times. What do we do with date times? Date times, essentially, we did like extract, right, day of week or whatever it was from the, created at. Extract month. So just extract different components from a date time. Like I said, this is very valuable in analytics and data science because dates just have so much information in them. Right, like the day of the week is valuable for it has like predictive value. Like the month has predictive value. Just by doing, like kind of taking every component you can from a date time and putting it into something like a machine learning model, you can oftentimes like do quite well, better than maybe other people would be doing if you did some sort of ML competition or whatever. Um, so yeah, this is valuable, but like I said, for organizing this stuff in your head, I would just, I think an outline is quite useful. All right. Questions before moving on from here? One other thing to note is, like, there's a reason why we had this connect directly to Postgres. Like, some of these functions might not be available in every database, or they might work slightly differently. Like if you use, for instance, MySQL, it might work differently. We're learning Postgres. It is by far like the most popular database, and a lot of databases are built off of Postgres. For example, Redshift, or Redshift's a good example. So anyway, this is a good one to know, but if you're using a different database, you probably just have to look at the documentation. Cool. All right, so the other thing is just, the next lesson was really moving on to null values. So here you can see we have some null values in this case. So here we're loading up some data. I guess I already loaded this. It says the persons table already exists. That's fine. So if we just select from persons, you can see we have a bunch of first name data that's null. Right now I'm selecting on it. I am recording. Let's just do limit 5. Okay. So a couple things we can do. This shows up as none just because it's pandas, like a pandas data frame you're seeing, but this is really null, like in the database. Here's a bunch of others, null values. So the first thing is this null if. So we can say null if first name, and then we can just put like unknown. Let's see if that works. Right? You see this? That didn't work at all. Select null if first name unknown. Sorry, I might have done this wrong. Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. I apologize. I'm confusing the two. This should be coalesce. Apologies for that. So what we just have is, you kind of see it. Now everywhere that first name was null, right? So here it was null. So we had Enos and then null, Candace and then null. Now we have Enos and then unknown. Okay, so this is kind of like a default value, right, in Python. This coalesce, where here we are saying when first name is null, maybe we want it to be represented as something else. All right. You can imagine working with numeric data this way, that maybe you want it to be 0, or sometimes you want to make it the average in data science. You want to say, okay, we don't know what the price of this house was, so instead because we don't know, we'll just say it's like the most generic house, or the most generic price. So you'll set it as like the average, something like that. Another thing maybe you want to do is, instead of setting it as like a hard-coded value, you could set it as like the next best thing. Like maybe you have like the last name or something like that. So here we'll say coalesce the first name. When we do not have the first name, instead of setting it to unknown, set it to the last name. Okay, so now you can see before we had unknown here, and now we have this person's last name. And of course you could do like as, first name or something like that. Or it says, say, like coerced first name. This way we can just get a default column here. So this is the coalesce function. The first argument is just the column name. The second argument is what you want to replace it with. Okay. Another kind of working with null, I kind of stepped on it, is let's say select first name from persons, limit 10. We don't have any blanks, I don't see. Let's see if I can do where first name equals empty string. No, we don't have any of them. Okay, we can do it. I'll have to kind of make up a silly example, I think. Let me see if I have one here. Yeah, well, you can see what I'm doing. I don't know if we actually have it. This is like the null if, right? What null if is saying is take something that's an empty string and set it as none. Does that make sense? Right? So in the database, let's do it with a different value. Like, let's just do select. Let's see if we can do select star from persons. And now let's say we say, this kind of doesn't really make much sense, but we'll say if their last name is Durrett, set it to be null, right? So we'll say select null if last name, and then we'll do comma Durrett, right, as last name, something like that. And you see that? It changed this value here to null. So when is something like that useful? It's useful for cleaning data, right? Because if you have some null values and you have some empty strings, you may want to have them all be consistent, right? And effectively say, hey, this this empty string is really a null value, okay? Like sometimes you'll see like -99 stored in the database as saying we don't know what this real value is. And again, you may just want to make it consistent. Right? And remember, like as a data engineer, maybe you're combining data from different sources, and one source is using like -99, one source is using like a 0, right? Like that can be very dangerous if people use a 0, because that really means they don't know what it is, not that the value is 0, right? Okay, and then the last thing is, let's say you want to take this value, like any of the kind of like the null values, and you want to, we'll take this, we'll coerce it to null value, and then we'll say when it's a null value, we can coalesce it to be like unknown. So I think it'll be something like this. Yeah, see how that works? So this thing started as Durrett, and then we basically said if it's Durrett, set it to be null, and now once it's null, set it to be unknown. So when is this valuable? This is valuable if it's not just this Durrett that's unknown. Let me show you. It's also let's go to 10. Let's do first name. Sorry. Let's do something a little bit better. We'll do first name Enos. So we'll say when the first name is Enos, we'll coalesce it, we'll say that it's really null, and then we're going to use coalesce to, whenever values are null, make them unknown. So what this should do is take this guy, make it null, but this thing's also null. So both of these will be coalesced to be unknown. You see that? So this thing originally was Enos. This thing was originally none. For this thing, we applied the null if. We first applied the null if on kind of every value, saying, okay, if it's not null but it's Enos, make it null. And then on that, we wrapped this coalesce function, saying, all right, now that we've made everything properly null, let's make it unknown. Let's replace the nulls with unknown. Right? And you're doing that by just having the first value here not be just first name, like the column, but rather null if first name Enos, right? The coerced column. Let me do that one more time, because I think it was maybe a little confusing. So we'll start with the first name. Okay, and you see we have like an Enos. Imagine this was an empty string or something, right? What we want to do first is say, okay, let's take all the Enoses and really we want to treat them as null. So select null if first name Enos. And now that will make this thing a null value. Okay, and this was originally null. And I'll say as first name. Now everything is properly null, like the original nulls are null, and this Enos thing is null. So now we can coalesce, if I can spell it, coalesce, coalesce this column this entire column, which is this thing, to be whatever value I want. Basically, that when it's null, make it something like unknown or whatever you want it to be. So that should take all these null values and make them unknown. All right. So the point here is you can just combine them. All right. Next thing. So the next thing is like case when statements. Obviously, there's labs for all of this to practice it. For case when statements, we can really use them. There's a couple of different use cases for them, but I think like there's two ones we can talk about for now. So this is our Yelp restaurant data, and you see this like category of American traditional. So what you may want to do is just like some of these values are good, right? Like pubs, that's fine. Indian, that seems fine. Trinidadian, right? But maybe like we don't want to really distinguish American traditional from American modern. To us, American is descriptive enough. So what we can do is say, okay, we'll select category from restaurants, limit 5, and then what we'll do is say, actually, select case when the category equals American traditional. So when the category is this value, then just set it equal to American. So in other words, we're like cleaning it. Otherwise, set it to the original value of category, end. And then we can call this as category if we want. Let's see if that worked. So now you see this kept everything the same, but it replaced American traditional with American. So the syntax for this, I always have to remember, like in my head, that it's case when, then else end. Or in my head, I'd probably just say case when, then end, and then I fill in the else. So it's case when is just if. All right? So this is our if clause. If the category equals American traditional, right? Then, right, in Python, we don't have to put like a then there, but here we do. This is the value. Otherwise, keep it the same. And then finally, end the if-else statement. Okay? So case when the Boolean expression, notice in Postgres, it's just an equal sign. It's not double equals like it is in Python. So case when the Boolean expression, then the value we want. Otherwise, right, do nothing. Keep the original value. If you don't do this else statement, it's going to set these other values to null. I can show you that. But you'll figure it out when you see it. If you do then American end, you see that? Yeah, it did coerce American traditional to American, but it did not handle any of the other things. So it just left them as null. So you have to put the else the original category here. All right.
But Jeff, in other databases, you can have multiple values. Category equal to American, then do this. Category equal to, let's say, Mexican, do this. Does it support that as also?
Yeah, I think so. When category equals American traditional, then American. When category, let's see. I'm not totally in practice with it. Let's try Indian,
sure.
Then South Asian or something like that. We can try it. Let's try it. Yeah, that worked. You see that? So case when category equals American traditional, then American, and then we just put another when clause here. So this is kind of beginning the expression. The end is ending the expression. And then the when clause is kind of like our if. If American traditional, this. If, Indian, then this. For all others, right? But the default, the original value. All right, so this is one use case of it. Other things you'll sometimes see is like calculations with this. So, for example, okay, let's do this. Let me. Yeah, oftentimes you will see this split up over many lines. All right, and just note, this is just one column. Like so you can always do comma, like the name of the restaurant. I think, right, and that works fine. So it's like select name, comma, case, and then we go into the next select statement, right? And all we did was we just cleaned up this American traditional value to be American and Indian. Now we prefer, for whatever reason, to make it South Asian. All right. Okay, so this is one use case. It's kind of like cleaning the data. Another time is, say you want to count up like the different kinds of restaurants, and you can do that. Sometimes you'll see people do that through case when statements. So let me show you. So we select case when, let's say category equals Chinese, then 1, else 0, end. And we can do, if you kind of just, from restaurants. Okay, so this is just, when there's let's say, for now we'll call this is Chinese. It's a Chinese restaurant. Else 0, I need the end. I put the alias before I ended the clause there. Okay, so here you can see it's like, a lot of these are other kinds of restaurants. But what you can do is you can sum this statement up. So that will add up all these zeros and ones. And then let's say as number of Chinese restaurants. Right, so you can see there's 300 Chinese restaurants. And then you can do this for the other kinds that say you care about. Right, so comma, some case when category equals, let's put American, then 1, else 0, end as a number of American restaurants. Right, and we can add these up. I guess we did not have a category. Maybe we'll do American traditional. All right, so we got a few of them. All right, so why is this useful? Like, because probably in your head you're thinking, well, we could just do group by, and you can, right? But sometimes for like presentation purposes, maybe there's only some categories that you care about, right? Like maybe you just, for whatever reason, you're comparing Chinese restaurants versus American restaurants, and you don't need all the other categories. Another thing is, it's displayed horizontally. This might feel pretty slight, but that is like a reason why some people would choose it, is just like, all right, this is laying this out horizontally as opposed to group by, it's vertically. I'm sure you could fix that view in other ways too, but this is one way to do it. One other thing I want to point out, remember, I guess we should talk about it in working with null. Remember when things are, let's select from first name again. Let's do select star from persons, limit 10. So you can see we have these null values, all right, like in first name. If you count the number of rows, this may feel like a tangent, but it's going to relate in a second. If you just count star, this is the total number of rows, right? So there's 1,000 rows in our database. If you count the number of first names there are, this counts the number of non-null values, right? I think sometimes people forget this. So we can see, hey, we're missing, about a third of the first names. So like a little bit less than a third of the first names. So the reason why I bring this up now is because another way that you'll see this written, this like kind of add up the ones and the zeros here, is you'll see it written like this. You'll do case when a category equals Chinese, then 1, and then no else statement, right? And then I'll put like is Chinese restaurant. Okay, and then we'll just do that one for now, from restaurants. Okay, so case when, then end 0. We read this, and I broke it because I have an extra parentheses here. Okay, so now a lot of these are not a number. These are like null values. Case when, then end. Then case when it's this, then 1, end. So I believe what we could do now is you can count this. And this should produce the same result. See that? We got 300 again. Why does that work? Because this is really else, like null, right? And so and 1 is a present value, and so it's present when it's Chinese, and it's null in all other circumstances. So when we count up, what we're doing is we're counting up the present values, just like we saw, right, in the other thing. So this is an equivalent statement. So you could do count, case when, blah, blah, then 1, right? Last time this is, you could put any value here, but you'll see 1 oftentimes, and then you just count it. Or you could do sum, case when category is Chinese, then 1, else 0, end. Right? These are equivalent. Right? Do y'all feel okay about this? Yeah? Okay, great. All right, cool. So let me deploy